friendly neighborhood nerds. This is Judah Rad. I'm here with Robo Strange. Today we have a truly awesome guest. We would like to extend a very special IFLC welcome to Senior VP of Marvel Publishing and Marvel's longest-running editor, Tom Brevoort. Before we even get into the comic book stuff, how's life? How's life treating you, Tom?
Life is fine. Life is okay. It's starting to get back to normal. Starting to leave our house and venture out into the world a little bit. So everything is good. Everything doing good for you guys?
Yeah. It's always nice when the apocalypse starts to end. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that depends on what your business is. We kind of live on the back of a series of cascading apocalypses. So we always need there to be another apocalypse around the corner to keep our characters busy.
That's right.
Right on. Makes sense.
So getting right into it, you've been with Marvel a good portion of my adult life, and it's clear by your work and by the stuff around you right now in the shot that you're a massive superhero fan, even outside of your profession. How has your wealth of experience working behind the scenes affected your perspective in this medium, like how you get your job done?
I mean, hopefully I know more than I did then before I started. But, I could still, and I still do, read comics for enjoyment. I haven't gone into a physical comic shop for over a year now, which is weird.
Mm-hmm.
But I still, order books every week from Midtown Comics, and they ship them to me. And so I'm doing a bundle of books every week, like clockwork, and that's beyond the actual big stack of Marvel stuff that they send me once a month.
So they say that once you see how hot dogs made, you don't really want to eat hot dogs anymore. And I'll be honest with you, some people who've been on our show have said ever since I wrote, then I can't really enjoy stories, so I just keep creating. That's obviously not the case for you then.
No, that hasn't been my experience. Certainly, some people are like that,
mm-hmm.
but it hasn't really impacted on my enjoyment of the medium and following stuff outside of the 9 to 5.
And Robo, just kind of as a counterpoint to you, I have seen how hot dogs are made, and I still enjoy hot dogs.
That's a fact. Yeah, I eat Jello too.
Touche. So Tom, as sort of a non-insider, it's very interesting to watch how the periodic rebrands work. Like we had the Dark Reign era, and then it kind of led into Marvel's Heroic Age, to Marvel Now, to All New, All Different, to Legacy, to Fresh Start. It seems like it's cyclical. There's like an overarching storyline that sort of affects all the titles in various capacities. And then you have like a culminating event, sort of like Siege, and then a reset. However, Marvel's very different than DC in the sense that when DC has their crisis, it's basically they reboot everything in more or less. Marvel doesn't necessarily fully reboot, which I like. So when these things happen, what's sort of like the editorial thought process going into these cycles, and how long-term is the planning for like when you start something like All New, All Different Marvel, and where it begins, where you want it to go? How does that work?
Well, typically we have, sort of a sketchy plan a couple of years out, and that's a rolling couple of years. Sometimes it's a little longer, sometimes it's a little shorter. We meet with our creators, although over the last year and a half, it's been more on Zoom meetings like this one than it is in person. We meet with our creators, 2 or 3 times a year to kind of map out what's going on in all the books, what ideas people have, and what direction the Marvel Universe as a whole should take. You talk about that cyclical approach, and there's some truth to that, except I would argue the point that it all resets to something. Certainly some things pendulum swing and they go way over here, and then they come back to whatever you might consider the standard. But over the whole of the Marvel Universe at once, there's always something that's, not where it's supposed to be at any given point. So the idea that there's ever a reset moment in the Marvel Universe is a little bit untrue. You know, things are constantly evolving forward. There are constantly new stories and new status quos the characters are in, and that evolves, you know, year in and year out. So you know, and that evolution and the fact that things are not static, things change, and there can be exciting new developments or scary new developments for any of our characters is part of the reason why people are interested in following the stories. Like, it's not just you read like a Simpsons episode. You read 20 pages, and at the end, everything goes back to the beginning. The next 20 pages. You know, everything that we do is serialized fiction and serialized storytelling. So over the course of months or years, you're constantly moving into hopefully new territory of some sort, even if individually, whatever, Iron Man gets weirder and then gets more traditional and gets weirder, you know, along the course of that path. That progression doesn't match exactly the progression of where Thor is, or where Captain America is, or where Spider-Man is, or whatever.
Apparently, Doctor Strange is going to die very soon. So
that's the rumor. Yes.
Yeah.
So
everybody's going to go sooner or later.
Right. And everybody's got to come back.
That's unless you're Uncle Ben. Too soon. So talking about change and the ebb and flow and the pendulum. So Marvel comics in general, but there's like, I feel like there's two camps. One camp is don't mess with my superheroes and keep giving me the same stuff, and I hate change, which I think for some things I'm kind of like that on. But I think I've been mostly in the other camp where constantly looking for a new jumping on point. And even if I'm reading comics, it's nice to see a new, fresh story and something that other new comic book readers can kind of start reading from. How do you guys balance that? Is it difficult to juggle?
It's certainly difficult to juggle, and the reason it's difficult to juggle is I don't disagree with you on the fact that there's two camps, but what I would say is the same reader will not fall into one of those two camps. That, you know, that reader may go, man, I like Thor the way I like Thor. You know, whatever, Walt Simonson's story, that's the way you do Thor, and that's what I want from my Thor, and I want him to be Sigurd Jarlson. I want him to, you know, be wearing that crazy Walt Simonson armor, and that's the Thor I love. Do that constantly. But Iron Man, I need new stuff. Like, you got to do something wilder with Iron Man, because that's boring. That standard thing with the briefcase and the armor and stuff. You got to find something else to go on. So the same reader will have a different reaction to every story. And part of that is every time people pick up a comic, they want both comfort food, they want something that feels familiar and that they have an emotional connection to and love, but also something that surprises them and excites them and maybe scares them or shakes them up a little bit in the same sort of way that the stories did when they were, you know, 10 and were starting to read comics and were suddenly, oh my God, look at this crazy thing that's happened to Daredevil. I can't wait to find out how that's gonna, you know, what's gonna happen to him next. So you are constantly dealing with the push and pull, and at any given time, the audience runs the span on whatever story you're doing. So, you know, at the same time, you'll have people going, man, I love this idea of this crazy story where all the mutants are living in Krakoa and they've got their own island and they're building a nation and everyone's together. Well, how's this going to go? Oh, this is a good idea, a bad idea. All those guys are there. What's going to... And you have guys on the other side going, I want the X-Men to be in a mansion in Westchester. Why aren't they doing the X-Men like I love them on the cartoon and I love them... That they don't live on an island. Why are they? And so you're constantly getting bombarded with people who feel all along that spectrum, or who are somewhere in the middle, going, "Well, I like the X-Men when they were in a mansion, but I'm kind of interested in what's going on this island."
Yeah.
And vice versa. Oh, I was liking the island, but now it's getting a little played out. I wish they would do some more stuff where they were in a mansion, or whatever. So you're constantly kind of, again, sort of pushing things forward. Trying to make sure you don't go too far with anything or too long with anything, and constantly be switching it up. You know, I use that analogy of like the pendulum swing a lot. because that tends to be the way a lot of things work, not just at Marvel, but in comics in general, with long-running characters. You know, you embark on a story and it goes as far as it goes and as long as it goes, and there is a natural sort of gravity that kind of brings you back somewhere to around whatever you might think of as the classic status quo for any given character. So you know, the trick is always the journey is the interesting part. And so as long as you don't go too long or you don't go too short, and consequently, lose out on some good story material by racing through it, you're constantly having to juggle that stuff. But there's also like these days it's super easy to hear from the audience. Much more so than it was years ago, where pretty much you were limited to people would send you letters, and maybe you'd see some people a couple of times over the year at a convention. Now social media is everywhere. Everybody's got a YouTube channel. Everybody's
no shortage of opinions.
So you're constantly hearing on almost a minute by minute basis, unfiltered, what the audience is thinking about at that second about whatever thing happens to be.
That's right.
And the difference, or the thing that myself and the editorial staff and the creative teams have to do, kind of, is react less to what people are saying and react more to what people are doing.
That's right.
Anytime we've had a story that's been a big, huge success, there's always been a lot of talk about it, and a lot of that talk has been, this is scary, I don't like this, you're doing and everything, why don't you put it back? And that's great, but what I look at is, how many copies are we selling? If we're selling more than we sold last month, well, people are clearly interested, whether they're interested in that they're excited, or they're terrified, or they're watching a car crash, or they're watching fireworks go off. They're paying attention, and they're putting their money where their mouth is. I tell the younger editors, like, it's very easy to sign a petition. You'll get these emails from whatever, change.org, where everybody on earth is putting together a petition, and it's super easy to get. I can get 10,000 people to sign anything. Because it doesn't require any effort. Like, it's very simple. I put a good enough pitch together. I send you an email. I send it 100,000 of them, and I can get 10,000 signatures, because it's easy. Just go press this button. All right, I'm done. I don't have to do anything. Getting 10,000 people to do something, to take any actual action, is hard. So them buying a comic is a better example of what they actually feel when the rubber hits the road, when it's time to walk into the shop on Wednesday and open up their wallet and decide what things interest them enough to pick up the next issue and to read and find out what goes on and what stuff doesn't. Typically the other sort of cliche of that is the sort of boutique book that's like a cause celeb, or that's like a hardcore fan favorite that just can't attract enough of a mainstream audience to be successful. You hear for years about books. Oh, that was the greatest book ever, and it was so well done, and it was so sophisticated that it pushed the boundaries in so many ways, and it was so, but it never sold beyond the mid-list title or even lower. And that too is a function of this. Like, that there's an audience for it, and that audience really likes whatever that book is doing and how it's working. But that audience isn't necessarily wide enough to make it successful long term, because that particular, more people, whether they really love it or they just like it, more people like vanilla than like Tutti Frutti. And the Tutti Frutti is great. You don't always want to have vanilla, and if you've eaten a lot of vanilla in your time, getting some Tutti Frutti might seem pretty cool. But overall, your chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry is going to be your best sellers, because that's what appeals to the widest number of people.
So real quick, I know Jude has a question. You bring up the pendulum a lot, but I know that one of the effects of the pendulum, when used as an analogy, is sometimes overcorrection, right? Have you ever felt in your time that Marvel has overcorrected and like, on any particular kind of event or a change to the status quo?
Um, I think certainly there have been times we've overcorrected. Sometimes that's just us falling behind the curve on the reaction from the audience. We're not successful with everything. The trick of this business is while it looks fairly simple, it's really like doing alchemy. You never know what combination of elements is going to work. And the same combination of elements on a different character or a different title at a different time, the same title at a different time with a different story slightly, will give you a different result. It's not like science where 2 + 2 always equals 4. Sometimes 2 and 2 equals 3, and sometimes it equals F, and sometimes it equals 2700. And so, there have certainly been times when, either we've cut something too short or we've overdone. There was a lot of complaining at a certain point, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years ago, that too much of the Marvel universe had changed. That we had shifted a lot of the characters to alternate people. Jane Foster was Thor, and Sam Wilson was Captain America, and there was a lot of Miles Morales going on, and there was the feeling, it seemed like it bubbled up almost out of nowhere, that there's too much of this. Everything is changing. I don't know where I stand. And individually, all of those stories sort of started by themselves. Axel Lazo and Greg Pak and Mark Panisha had an idea for, we'll do Totally Awesome Hulk. We'll make Amadeus Cho the Hulk, and that'll be cool and be different because we'll see what a different person is like in the role of the Hulk. But and individually, you're working on that one thing, that one book. I'm not necessarily always thinking, or not thinking as much about, well, at the same time, Jason Aaron's doing this with Thor, and Rick Remender is doing this with Cap, and all this stuff is happening. And so at a certain point, you can turn around and go, well, the people that feel that way, maybe they have a point. You can look over the line and go, well, maybe enough of it is in a weird place now that we maybe need to correct back the other way and go, well, maybe we should get to some of this a little faster than we might have otherwise, rightly or wrongly. So that stuff certainly happens. You mentioned at the stop Heroic Age, and Heroic Age was a very well-intentioned misfire on our part. We had done a whole bunch of years where we did big events, and we got to the end of Siege, and we went to Heroic Age, and we made this thing. Oh, we're not going to do an event next year. Everybody's saying there's event fatigue. We're going to give you a break. We're just going to do stories, and all the numbers went down because people went, oh, I can relax. I don't have to worry about it anymore. And, we fairly quickly went, oh, that was a mistake. We better figure out what our next event is. And that's when we started planning. I don't remember if it was Fear Itself or Avengers vs. X-Men or both of them, going, yeah, okay. It's, that event fatigue is an illusion. Everybody was saying it, but it didn't reflect where they would put their money on Wednesday.
Makes sense.
So some rumor control real quick. This is old news. It's just I'm just curious, really. It's not even for anyone else. But so it was like a few years ago. You talk about by the way, I like the X-Men on Krakoa. I didn't love the X-Men in Limbo.
Okay.
But
well, that's fine.
Yeah. But so like a few years ago, there was like, I think the general idea is that there was a concerted effort by Marvel Publishing to lower the footprint of the X-Men in favor of the Inhumans, because Disney or whoever didn't have the movie and film rights for the X-Men, but they did for the Inhumans. So it was like a licensing issue, that there was a effort to kind of boost the Inhumans as being like almost like to replace the X-Men. Is there any truth to that, or is that just nonsense?
There's a nugget of truth to that, but it's not to the extent that people make it out online and so forth. There's not that kind of concerted effort to minimize or to maximize stuff. Certainly, all throughout that period, we published X-Men comics, and a lot of X-Men We've never not published a lot of X-Men comics,
Right.
partly because X-Men comics sell. They have a huge audience. People love those characters. We're always going to do X-Men. There certainly was a concerted effort that we made to go, let's try to make something out of the Inhumans. And whatever happened to be going on with X-Men at that time, or whatever the feelings different people had, it seemed like that very quickly was seen as, oh, they're setting up the X-Men to replace the Inhumans to replace the X-Men, and that wasn't really quite it. But again, there was enough of that we sort of steered into that at a certain point and went, okay, well, let's lead it up to X-Men versus Inhumans. If people think that they're going to go at it, we'll steer into that. Let's do exactly that, and give them what they want, and let these two crews punch out one another. But again, people and I've said this a lot over the years, and nobody believes me, or the people that believe me, there aren't enough of them. But really, honestly, again, you go out into the internet verse, and everybody has a theory on which shadowy, mouse-eared mastermind is controlling whatever's going on at Marvel, and why decisions are being made, and it's all the work of whatever sinister, shadowy guy there is. And I gotta tell you, that's not really the case. We don't really operate any differently now than we did before Marvel was owned by Disney. The shadowy mastermind who's behind everything are the same bunch of dopes that were behind it before there was a Disney. And again, it's not exactly the same people, but a bunch of them are the same or similar. And everybody's trying their best to do the best comics that they can do and take things in different new directions and so forth. So I mean, certainly the fact that Marvel has become kind of a worldwide, global thing right now, both the reach of Disney in terms of getting those characters through merchandising and licensing and so forth, into the consciousness globally, combined with the fact that Marvel Studios has kind of an unprecedented track record in terms of successful movies, and now a really good streaming track record, at least sort of 3 for 3 at this point. And that means that like a lot more people are aware of these characters, and are aware of these characters in a very specific way.
Mm-hmm.
But we have regular conversations with the studios crew. And we do regular info dumps back and forth, so that we know kind of what they're doing, at least in the broadest sense, and they know kind of what we're doing in the broadest sense. And the conversation that we always have with them always boils down to, I tell people, like, Studios does maybe one Captain America story every 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
I do 2 Captain America stories every month minimum. So my rate of churn is going to be a lot faster. And what the studios team wants from publishing is they want a lot of raw material. Don't tell the stories that we are telling now. Tell the stories that can become the stories that we tell next year. That having been said, again, it is synergistic. We know that there's an Eternals movie coming, and that means there's going to be a lot of attention and a lot of interest in who those characters are and what they're doing. And if nothing else, there'll be a global advertising campaign, Eternals everywhere. That makes it a pretty good time to try to do more stuff with the Eternals in comics. But in doing that, our goal isn't to let's just match the movie. It's sort of to go, let's do the next thing. And maybe that will be the raw material that becomes Eternals 2 or Eternals 3 or whatever. Or it doesn't, in which case we'll do something else, either with something else or with the same thing down the line. There is that interaction. It's not like everybody is siloed, but it's also like our creators are as much fans as anybody. And so, if they go to see, Avengers Infinity War, they come out loving all the same stuff that everybody else loved, and that impacts on the way they handle the characters and the kinds of stories that they come up with moving forward. Pretty much since 2008, nobody who writes Iron Man can hear him in any other voice than Robert Downey Jr.
Right.
And, that's not like any shadowy, puppet master saying, you must make this sound like Downey. It's just, you can't escape it. That dude was, for 10 years, was Iron Man everywhere. And so, for a whole generation, even of creators, that's how they think. And that tends to be what they're trying to emulate on the page. Not exactly, but like you read any Iron Man balloon, you hear it in that voice. It just happens because the impact that those films and the live action has is just so strong on the consciousness. It can't help but shift things. You hear Chris Evans when you read a Captain America comic, at least these days. You can maybe go back and read a Cap comic from the 70s or 80s and disassociate yourself and go, this is whatever voice you have for Captain America in your head. But these days, you pick up a new Cap comic, it sounds like Chris Evans.
We actually had a question in the chamber. How much influence does upper level Disney have on editorial? And then as you were talking, it changed to, well, maybe it goes the other way. And I was going to ask, how much does publishing have on cinema? But the way it's like they're both non-questions, and it seems to be this synergy that just kind of feeds on each other.
Yeah, it's a big sort of wibbly wobbly ball of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, like, we don't know necessarily what things they're going to click on and when, and so it's kind of cool, frankly, when they do hit on something.
We're getting gore.
Yes, we're getting gore. I got to the end of Falcon Winter Soldier and I went, there's Carlos's Captain America costume.
Yeah.
That's it's not every line is exactly where he drew it, but it's super close.
Yeah.
And that was like him and me and Rick and a couple of guys, Joe Q and whatnot, coming up with this thing, whatever, 4 or 5 years ago. And now there's a guy walking around wearing it, and that's Captain America. That's just like a sort of a cool fallout of things. It's neat, and that's kind of why we do the stuff that we do. There's no point in us just now kind of going, let's do the same stories that they're doing over and over again. We have to constantly be at the tip of the spear, going, what can we do? Where can we push things? Where can we take things? And then the studio's crew is very, very good at figuring out what works in film and how to pull whatever elements are appealing to them and remix and remaster them for their medium and for the cinematic universe that they're building, which is also crazy and interconnected and interlocking, just as our publishing, Marvel universe is. So it's never like a one-to-one thing. That Cap costume is the costume we came up with, except it's slightly different, and Sam gets it in a slightly different set of circumstances, but close enough that you can look at it and go, right, that Captain America story that we did years ago, here it is on film or on streaming, except it's completely different, but it's exactly the same.
Yeah, I like what you said about the fans. I think that's a piece that especially like Twitterverse or social media kind of forgets, is there are human beings that have emotions and they're fans. And you said the year 2008, I'm old, so I was an adult, but there are creators now that are both in Disney and in publishing that were probably kids in 2008, that were teenagers. Sure. And now they get to create stuff. So while everybody wants to, and I'm sure there's a little bit, bottom line matters, but there's still an element of, wow, this story that I loved when I was 16, I get to bring to life. And that's something. Okay, so go to the next question real quick. And great segue, because when we talk about the MCU, we've all heard the term evolve or die, right? And we've seen a lot of evolution in Marvel, not just in cinema and MCU, but even going digital with the Marvel Unlimited and bringing comic books to your phone and all that. What else can we expect from Marvel's modernization efforts. Anything you want to announce?
Well, again, Stanley used to routinely, say, well, Marvel's on the march and we're taking over the world. And so, we're going to keep doing that. I don't know what the next technological innovation will be. I can guess, though, that whatever it happens to be, however stories are being gotten to people and being consumed, we'll have a foothold there, and we'll try to build out a space because it's all interconnected. We just happened today to see a presentation from the Marvel Games group, which is the group of people who work on all of the Marvel video games of any sort. Both the sort of platform or console game and the mobile games that go onto your phone and so forth. And they're very plugged into wanting to both, do whatever they need to do as an individual game, but also reflect whatever happens to be going on in publishing or in media and whatnot. Again, very synergistic. So that's a place where we didn't have a space that was super big 10 years ago, and now there are, I don't know, a dozen different games, all of which are generating, additional downloadable content or regular new events and things, and whatever it happens to be. If you're playing Puzzle Quest or you're playing Avengers or the upcoming Guardians game or whatever, they're trying to find ways that they can add to that segment of the Marvel universe, and maybe some of that stuff can be reflective back the other way. We used in Secret Empire the Hydra Captain America. By the end of that, used an armored costume that originated in games that we liked the look of, and went, okay, well, we can make something of that and use that in an actual story. And so the two sides kind of help to support one another. So the answer there is I don't know, because 10 years ago I wouldn't have been able to tell you half the things that we're doing right now. There's an Avengers campus in Anaheim. They got a huge, not even just like there's a ride. There's a whole campus of Avengers stuff, and I could never have told you that 10 years ago. So in the same sort of way, I can't begin to tell you what will happen in the next 10, but whatever direction, the popular entertainment of the world goes in, there'll be some Marvel involvement there somewhere, because it's inevitable that there will be.
So what you're saying is that soon you'll be able to implant comics directly into my brain, just like Neo in the Matrix.
I can pretty much do that already.
Yes, so can he, actually. So yeah, I'm sure that works. But here, I'll give you one. You can have it for free. You don't have to put my name on it. But there was a missed opportunity, and I don't know if this has anything to do with you, but I feel you have connections. In the last Marvel game, one of the side deals that you could do for achievements was collect comic books. Now, I'm not saying that you had to give everyone on there, but they had Jason Aaron's store on there, and I was like, that's so awesome. And what I think would have been awesome is for at least maybe number ones or a couple that you can click and the full comic book was in there. Because I know a lot of people that played the game that do not read comics, and that would have got them. You can have it, But
we're actually, and again, I don't know all the ins and outs because I'm not like super versed in everything that everybody in games is doing. But they've done a lot of stuff like that, where they've had downloadable links that would take you to copies of the book, usually digital copies, either on the Marvel app or I'm not sure exactly how even they manage it. But yeah, we've done exactly that a bunch on different gaming platforms and different things. I just don't know what the limitations are with any particular game or what choices are made. I would tend to assume if we're doing a Guardians of the Galaxy game, there'll probably be a lot more Guardians books there than there will be Thor books. But maybe there'll be some Thor books because there's a connection between Thor and the Guardians in the films, and somebody will figure, well, we could do this, and or maybe they'll do some new level that involves Thor, and that will be one of your finds or your add-ins, your one-ups. As you're going through that level and accruing stuff. One of your bonuses could be a link to that. They do that stuff quite regularly, as I understand it. But I'm just not versed enough in the world of games to be able to point you to exactly where and what.
That's fair.
So, I don't know. I just have to say this. My personal opinion is that when Brian Michael Bendis started working for Marvel, that was like a groundbreaking moment in Marvel history. And I know you've worked really close with him. If it's not obvious, I'm a big Bendis fan, but you've worked with him quite a few times. I think that he added something to not just Marvel, but comics in general. Like if you read before Avengers Disassembled and the New Avengers and Alias, like before that era, there were funny characters in Marvel, but they weren't like modernly sarcastic and witty and funny in like a conventional, like relatable sense. It was more of like kind of like almost like a general type of humor. And he added like this very like relatable sarcasm to comic book dialogue, specifically with superheroes. Was this a deliberate thing that you both sort of introduced together, or was it just a product of Brian Michael Bendis, or like what was it like during this time?
Well, that's what you're talking about is absolutely a product of Brian. Nobody else can take any credit for any of that. That's Brian doing what Brian does, and I sort of agree with you. Every generation or so, there's one or two creators that kind of changed the game, and Brian was definitely that when he came into Marvel in a big way. And even though at the moment he's mostly over at DC and so forth, you can really still see the impact he had, not just on things like Miles Morales or Ironheart or any of the characters that he created, but even in the way stories are told, the way story arcs are paced out and so forth. And that's because there's now a whole generation of storytellers and younger creators who grew up reading Ultimate Spider-Man and Alias and New Avengers and all of that stuff, and are now applying those same approaches to the work they do through their own voice. I think Brian had a strong background, almost as he didn't write plays, but he had a playwright's background. He studied screenplays, and he brought a lot of that sensibility to his comic work, and he was in a position where Joe kind of discovered him. If you could discover somebody that had been publishing books for Caliber and writing Sam and Twitch, you're kind of discovering a thing that's already been discovered. But in terms of giving him a big platform, Joe putting him on Daredevil and then sort of bringing him into the larger Marvel U, gave him a spot and a spotlight. And he was both super prolific. He's a hardworking guy. He writes a lot, and he writes a lot consistently. And he's not, and I don't mean this to be derogatory to people who are not. He's not a tourist on a book, by which I mean he's not a guy who comes in and goes, "I'm going to write my 6 issues or 12 issues and then get out of Dodge." When Brian comes onto a title, whatever title it is, he kind of tends to set up his tent and bunker down for the long run, however long that run happens to be. Sometimes it's a year or two, sometimes it's a lot of years, but he's so he's always kind of building or playing for the long game, and that too is just a part of his sensibility. But his ear for dialogue and the stuff that you're talking about, that all I think comes out of his screenwriter or aspirational screenwriter background. His studying of plays in particular, and the spoken word, and his own sensibility. Like none of that, I can't take credit for an ounce of it. That is all Brian.
But you were still there, so it is cool to hear it is cool to hear your perspective on it. And so speaking of comics, speaking of stuff that might be coming out in the future, so we just finished up King in Black, which I loved, and Heroes Reborn just wrapped up, and that last issue, that Heroes Return, really cool. what big things can we expect going forward on the super awesome event front?
Besides Doctor Strange dying.
Besides Doctor
Again,
Strange dying.
anything that we haven't announced yet, it's not like I can tell you.
Okay.
You know, I can tell you that we're working on something that will probably hit around December, January. You know, and it is something that will grow out of stories that are going on right now in the same sort of way that King in Black grew out of Donnie and Ryan's Venom story. But I can't necessarily tell you what it is, you know, until we're ready to go to town with it. You know, it's not right or it's not wise to prematurely, you know, talk about that stuff. You know, but certainly, you know, closer to home, and certainly, you know, books that in terms of stuff that's just come out on top of things like King in Black, Planet-Size XMen that just dropped is super important for kind of setting up and propelling the next cycle of X-Men and mutant stories. I'm just trying to think around like what's going on. I mean, obviously now that Heroes Reborn is finished, we're about to move into another big story in Avengers. That's World War She-Hulk.
World War She-Hulk, yeah.
Starting with 46, but you know, like literally, I can almost go down like title by title and go, here's a big crazy thing that's happening here. Yeah, hopefully every book has something exciting going on, you know, in its own right. But in terms of what's going to be the you know, big all-encompassing, everybody in the pool sort of super adventures. Again, there's stuff coming up, and we have stuff even sort of sketchily planned beyond that December, January thing, but it's too early to say what that stuff is.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, I guess the important question is, are you excited?
Yes, I am.
Awesome. Okay. Then I'm excited.
As you should be. Get your, you know, save your money. You know, food and shelter are overrated. You will need your money on hand when these books drop, because your life will not be complete without the experience of reading them.
Awesome.
Awesome. All right. Ladies, gentlemen, and MBs, that is our show. That is the incredible Tom Brevoort. Thank you so much again for joining us and giving us a little bit of your time. Awesome.
Happy to do it.
So go check it out. Understand there's a lot more of Marvel out there, and we are out of here. See you guys.
If you want to hear interviews from industry pros, get first looks, and have access to endless comic content, wake up. Please wake up. You're in a coma. Your mother misses you.